So summer is officially over, and while it's still warm here in Florida, I'm definitely feeling those fall vibes creeping in. One of my favorite ways to welcome the season is by cozying up with a warm cup of tea and something sweet like these vegan apple pie cinnamon rolls. These rolls are the perfect blend of warm, comforting spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, and with the hint of those sweet apples, it's just the thing for those days when you want to just stay in and relax. In today's video, I'll show you how to make this fall-inspired treat with a healthy twist so you can enjoy all the cozy vibes no matter where you are. Welcome to Bites with Nay, where I like to share delicious plant-based recipes to help inspire you to a healthier lifestyle. Let's get into it. To begin the recipe, I'm going to start on the dough first. I am using yeast for this dough recipe, so I'm going to activate that while I get the dry ingredients ready. I simply just followed the yeast packet instructions, which basically told me to warm my milk and add sugar to it to activate. And because I'm trying to make a healthier version of the rolls, I am not using regular sugar, but instead replacing it with maple syrup, and you can also use agave. Once the milk was warm, I added my maple syrup and my packet of yeast and mixed until it was well incorporated and set aside. It took about 5 to 10 minutes for the yeast to activate, and you know it's ready when it starts to bubble and has that bread-like smell to the milk mixture. Once I set that aside, I started to work on the dry ingredients by carefully measuring everything out and sifting through the dry ingredients so it's well incorporated. In a separate bowl, I measured out all my wet ingredients and also mixed everything together so that it was well incorporated. Because these cinnamon rolls are vegan friendly, of course, I am not using eggs in this recipe. I'm actually replacing the eggs with applesauce and a blend of grounded up flax seeds. And I use the combinations of two because both are great egg replacements, but when you combine them together, this helps bind the dough so that everything holds together well. And it's a plus that flax seeds are a great superfood and add nutritional value to the dough. So now that our egg mixture is pretty well mixed, I'm also going to add the rest of the wet ingredients, which is going to be our milk mixture that we made earlier. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The yeast is very frothy and has formed these bubbles. That's how I know it's ready. I'm just going to mix everything all together. I forgot to hit record when I added vanilla to this, but this is going to complete our wet mixture, and then I'm going to add the dry ingredients into this bowl, and I'm just going to use a mixing spoon and mix everything together. And then once everything starts to get a little thick and stiffer, I'm going to move on to using my hands and kneading the dough until it's nice and smooth. This is going to take some time, especially if you're doing it by hand. Maybe took me about 5 to 7 minutes or so. So definitely use your big girl muscles. So because we're trying to make healthier choices when snacking, I did not use all-purpose flour, but instead switched it out for whole wheat flour, which I was pretty impressed with as far as texture. It held up just the same, and it really didn't alter the flavor much, which I appreciated. So after a while, your dough should start to form and come together. It might be a little sticky, which is fine, because we're actually going to add more flour later on after it's done resting. Knead and form your dough into a ball-like shape, and then we're going to cover it with a cloth on top, set it aside for about an hour, and we're going to wait for the dough to rise, and after an hour it should be about double in size. While the dough is rising, we're going to work on our apple pie filling and glaze. Every apple has a unique flavor profile about them. They all carry different levels of sweetness and tartness, so whatever apple you choose will help determine the flavor of your cinnamon roll. I'm using a mix of Macintosh and Gala apples to get a range of flavors. Whenever I'm using produce, I always make sure to clean them, so I'm just doing a simple apple cider vinegar and baking soda mixture and leaving it for about 5 to 10 minutes before I rinse them off with water and begin cutting them up. Once your apples are clean, you're going to begin cutting them into small bite-sized pieces so that they're easier to cook and easier to spread in your rolls. So instead of using regular white or brown sugar, I'm switching this for organic brown coconut sugar, which is unrefined and has a lower glycemic index, which basically just means it causes a slower rise in blood sugar levels compared to white sugar, and it has a small amount of nutritional content, and I really enjoy the flavor that comes from the sugar, and I personally think it's a great substitute for white or brown sugar. So this is what I'm using to help cook and break down the apples, as well as the important fall flavors like cinnamon, nutmeg, allspice, and I'm adding maple syrup, vanilla, and a touch of salt to help balance everything. And then I'm making sure to stir it just to make sure that everything is well combined. I'm going to cover this and cook it until it begins to soften, stirring every couple of minutes or so just to make sure it's evenly cooking. I'm also adding water and coconut milk into this to help create a sauce, which will be thickening later on in the process. After a couple minutes of cooking, the apples are going to start to release their juices. Just continue to cook down until they start to get a little thicker and softer, and you'll see them change in color as well. Once the apples are a little softer and more caramel in color, we're going to add some butter to melt, and this is going to help contrast the sweetness and give a nice balance of flavor, as well as help the sauce create a creamier texture. After your hour, check on your dough and it should be about double in size, and we're basically going to finish making our dough by adding our additional flour, kneading and forming our dough into a workable ball so that we're able to roll it out and begin our cinnamon rolls. Your dough is going to be somewhat sticky, so again, like I said, we're just making sure that we're forming and kneading with the additional flour so that it's workable, and this will probably take you a few minutes. You don't want to overwork your dough, but you definitely need it to be able to roll out once you flour your surface. I'm using like a tucking motion to fold the bread inwards so that I'm able to somewhat form it into a ball, and then I just continue to do this over and over again. I'm not really sure what the term is, but if you watch the video you can kind of see my little technique. After I finish forming my dough ball, I'm just flouring my surface where I'm gonna lay it out and begin to roll it. Now I don't have a rolling pin, but what I did have was this glass that was really easy to use as a rolling pin. So let this be your inspiration. If you don't have one, just use something that's easy to roll out the dough with. This is just like a drinking glass that I had, so sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. As I'm rolling it out, I'm trying to use an even pressure to create a rectangle that doesn't have one side that's too thin or the other side too thick. So just make sure to go back and forth, side to side, and just evenly press the dough out so that the thickness is all the same. So once I got to the shape that I thought was nice, I melted some butter and then just added it on my dough, swirling it around with my fingers so that I'm able to add my apple pie mixture in the middle and just spread everything around evenly so when I roll it, each bite has an even amount of apple filling. So when the apples were finished cooking, I separated the apple pieces from the juice that it created. And this is because we're going to make a thickened sauce later on. So just go ahead and fill up your dough with the apple pieces. And make sure to save 1/4 cup of the apple pieces because we're going to add that into our liquid later on when we're making the sauce for the top. So now I'm going to use my fingers and just tuck and roll the cinnamon rolls until it's all complete. And I'm just taking my time doing it little by little and just making sure that everything is somewhat, not super tight, but like a firm roll because you don't want anything falling out when you're cutting your rolls. And honestly, these are supposed to be rustic and have that homemade kind of feel. So don't put too much pressure if your rolls aren't perfect. You could always unroll it and then retry again. So the size of your cinnamon rolls are up to you. If you want bigger cinnamon rolls, cut them thicker and vice versa. I ended up using 3 fingers as like a loose guide to keep them even when I did my cutting. I kind of like them like right in the middle, not too big, not too small. So, cut according to whatever it is that you're looking for. Now I'm just putting them on the baking sheet and I'm making sure to put spaces in between each roll so that they cook evenly. And they're like 2 awkward pieces that were left, so I ended up just putting them in the middle because I didn't want to waste anything. So I already preheated my oven at 350 and I'm going to pop these in for about 15 to 20 minutes. I'll know that they'll be done when they're bigger in size and they'll have that like light golden brown color. So while those are cooking, we're going to work on our apple pie glaze, which is really simple. All we're going to do is add in our liquid from the apple mixture into a blender with some condensed milk and half of the apple pieces that we saved and then blend until smooth. And then we're going to just throw it in the pot for about 5 to 10 minutes and over time it will begin to thicken. After about 5 to 10 minutes of cooking, it should look something like this. And then we're going to add a arrowroot and water slurry. This is basically like a cornstarch slurry, but I don't use or cook with cornstarch. So this is another alternative that you can use. Or if you don't have that, then just use cornstarch. It pretty much works the same. This helps make it more like an apple pie texture and it gets it super thick, which is what we want for this glaze. The smell that the cinnamon rolls just filled the kitchen with was amazing, and I knew they were done because they had that light golden brown color and they were a little bit bigger in size. Once I took them out of the oven, I let them cool for about 5 minutes before plating them and then adding the glaze on top. Once you add the glaze on top, this is when everything comes together. You have the nice, soft, chewy bread, and then you have the pieces of apple in between, and then you have this decadent, sweet glaze on top. It's just the perfect combination of flavors, textures, and just gives you that fall vibe. And because some of the ingredients were switched out for healthier alternatives, these rolls are a little bit more healthier than your average roll. These apple pie vegan cinnamon rolls are for sure screaming fall and are perfect with a nice hot glass of tea or cocoa. And if you're anything like me, they probably won't last long in the kitchen. It's your girl Vegan A, and thank you so much for watching this Bites with Nay episode where I like to share delicious plant-based recipes in hopes to inspire you to live a healthier lifestyle. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe to be a part of the Vegan A family. And if you're feeling it, you can always follow me on Instagram, where I'm always posting health and wellness related content, whether it be food, lifestyle choices, tips and advice, and just honestly trying to get more in tune with my community so that you guys can see that living a plant-based lifestyle is not as hard or as complicated as people may think. So thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for what's coming next.